The Boeing 737 MAX 9 variant has the largest passenger capacity among the 737 family. It can typically accommodate up to 220 passengers in a single-class configuration. However, with a standard two-class configuration, it usually seats around 178 to 193 passengers. The Boeing 737 MAX 10 has the largest seating capacity of the 737 MAX family. It can seat up to 230 passengers in a single-class configuration. In a standard two-class configuration, it typically seats between 188 to 204 passengers. The Boeing 737 MAX 10 is equipped with the CFM International LEAP 1B engines. The thrust for the LEAP 1B engines is as follows. Thrust per engine, approximately 28,000 to 30,000 pounds. Thrust in kN, about 124 to 133 knots per engine. The exact thrust value can vary slightly based on specific engine configurations and settings. The Boeing 737 MAX 8 is powered by CFM International LEAP 1B engines. The thrust for these engines is thrust per engine, approximately 27,000 to 28,000 pounds. Thrust in kN, about 120 to 125 knots per engine. The Boeing 737-800 typically uses one of the following engines. 1. CFM International CFM 56-7B. Thrust per engine, approximately 24,000 to 27,000 pounds. Thrust in kN, about 107 to 120 knots per engine. 2. Pratt & Whitney PW4000-94. Thrust per engine, approximately 25,000 to 30,000 pounds. Thrust in kN, about 111 to 133 knots per engine. The exact thrust value can vary based on the specific engine variant and configuration used by the airline. The Boeing 737-400 is typically equipped with the CFM International CFM 56-3 engines. The thrust for these engines is thrust per engine, approximately 22,000 to 24,000 pounds. Thrust in kN, about 98 to 107 knots per engine. The specific thrust can vary slightly depending on the exact engine variant and configuration. The Boeing 737-500 is typically powered by CFM International CFM 56-3 engines. The thrust for these engines is thrust per engine, approximately 22,000 to 23,000 pounds. Thrust in kN, about 98 to 102 knots per engine. The specific thrust can vary slightly depending on the engine variant and configuration. The Boeing 737-200 is commonly equipped with CFM International CFM 56-3 engines. The thrust for these engines is thrust per engine, approximately 18,000 to 22,000 pounds. Thrust in kN, about 80 to 98 knots per engine. Please note that the 737-200 typically used older engine models, such as the Pratt & Whitney JT8D, which had slightly different thrust ratings. The Boeing 737-300 is typically powered by CFM International CFM 56-3 engines. The thrust for these engines is thrust per engine, approximately 22,000 to 24,000 pounds. Thrust in kN, about 98 to 107 knots per engine. The exact thrust can vary slightly depending on the specific engine variant and configuration. The Boeing 737-100 was equipped with Pratt & Whitney JT8D engines. The thrust for these engines is thrust per engine, approximately 14,000 to 15,000 pounds. Thrust in kN, about 62 to 67 knots per engine. The JT8D was one of the early high-bypass turbofan engines used in the 737 series, offering reliable performance for its time.
If you like my videos, then don't forget to show some love by hitting the like and subscribe button. Until next time.